Imagine a debt, just huge, a wrong so deep it feels like it stains your soul.
Hmm.
Could you ever really wipe that slate clean?
It's a tough question.
And what if, I don't know, the very nature of divine justice, the rules, made that impossible?
Made a clean slate impossible.
Yeah. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating question from one of you, our listeners.
Oh, cool.
And it kind of cracks open this dramatic fault line, right through how two major world religions see forgiveness.
Oh, okay. I think I know the one you mean. We got this really interesting query, right? Sparked by a YouTube discussion.
That's the one. Salvation in Christianity versus Islam, response to comment.
Right, from Rational Religion.
Mhm.
And an Ahmadiyya Muslim perspective responding to comments. And it really got the listener thinking about these, well, strikingly different paths to salvation in Christianity and Islam.
And what really grabbed their attention, and honestly, it grabbed mine too, it's got this sense of dramatic irony, was this apparent conflict.
The tension.
Exactly. On one hand, you've got this comforting picture of a God who's loving, endlessly forgiving, like the father in the prodigal son story, right?
The classic parable.
But then, kind of lurking in the background, are these doctrines about sin and, well, inevitable punishment. Seems pretty rigid.
It does seem like a clash.
So our mission today in this deep dive is to try and navigate this theological tightrope. We're focusing on the really dramatic contrast that came up in that YouTube discussion.
Okay, and it all started, didn't it, with a comment from a Christian viewer. Fuberus Rex, I think.
Yeah, that was his name. He said he found himself kind of unexpectedly agreeing with some of the Ahmadiyya Islamic ideas in the video.
Right, like two things really stood out to him. First, this idea that our righteousness, being good, it comes from God's initiative, not just us trying hard.
Okay.
And second, the importance of constant prayer, that's part of fulfilling our purpose.
Right, and here's where it gets really interesting. Fuberus Rex felt these ideas sounded a lot like what Jesus taught, but seemed, well, different from mainstream Christian interpretations he knew, and also different from his understanding of the Quran.
So a bit of a disconnect for him.
Yeah, which led him to ask these two kind of huge questions. You can feel the tension in them. First, does Ahmadiyya Islam teach that God loves us?
A fundamental question.
Totally. And second, if yes, is that love like the father in the prodigal son story? A love that's still there, rock solid, even when you reject it, even when you mess up badly.
Those are really crucial questions, yeah. And the speakers in the YouTube video, they jumped right on that. They saw this central tension, almost theatrical, like you said, in the listener's comment.
What was the tension they highlighted?
Well, they pointed to this combination that seems, on the surface, contradictory. A God full of that prodigal son love.
Okay.
Living side by side with the idea that humanity is inherently fallen.
Yeah.
And possibly referencing original sin.
Ah, original sin. Okay, hold that thought. The speaker in the video, they didn't mince words, did they?
Not at all.
They basically said, flat out, that if you genuinely believe in the doctrine of original sin, this idea we're all born flawed because of Adam, then that idea is completely contrary, their words, to the idea of a God who actually loves humanity.
Wow. That's a strong claim. Puts it right out there.
Incredibly strong, a really dramatic assertion.
Yeah. And to show why they draw such a stark line, they went straight to the parable of the prodigal son.
Okay, the parable again? How did they use it?
For them, in their interpretation, it's not just a nice story. It perfectly shows the relationship between God and humanity in Islam.
How so?
A God whose forgiveness for someone who truly repents is just immediate. No bargaining, no hoops to jump through. The debt is just gone, wiped clean.
That really speaks to that deep human hope for a fresh start, doesn't it?
Absolutely. But here's where the tension really ramps up, according to the video.
Okay.
The speaker argues that mainstream Christian doctrines, especially the ones attributed to Paul, Romans, Corinthians, Galatians, they see those as fundamentally, dramatically opposed to the simple message of the prodigal son. Like they're presenting two totally different views of God's personality.
Wow. Opposed. That's quite a contrast.
Exactly. The key difference, the dramatic pivot point for their argument, is how forgiveness itself works.
Okay, break that down.
In the parable, the son comes back. He's broken, sorry. The father doesn't say, okay, but first you need to pay me back or someone needs to suffer for this. He just forgives. The debt is treated like it never happened.
Right, just pure welcome.
But the video argues mainstream Christian doctrine adds this crucial, almost like fatal twist. The idea that sin requires punishment. It demands it.
And that leads to...
And so in their view, Jesus' crucifixion becomes the necessary dramatic fulfillment of that divine punishment.
Okay, so in that interpretation, Christian forgiveness isn't just a free gift, like in the parable.
Not directly, no. There's a cost. A price has to be paid, even if someone else pays it. It's not wiping the debt away directly. It's more like transferring the debt onto Jesus.
So it paints a picture of this huge theological gap, a real dramatic chasm between these two ways of understanding how God forgives.
A massive gap. And to show the Islamic understanding of God's mercy even more clearly, the speaker brings up this really powerful story from Islamic tradition, a hadith.
Okay.
It's about a man who did something truly awful. He killed 99 people.
99. Wow.
Just let that sink in.
99 lives. You'd think, I mean, surely that's beyond forgiveness, right? Unredeemable.
That's what you'd instinctively think, yeah. A point of no return.
Definitely the human reaction. But this man, crushed by what he'd done, feels this spark of remorse. He desperately wants forgiveness.
So what does he do?
First, he goes to a religious scholar, someone known for sticking strictly to the rules, the letter of the law.
Okay.
The scholar is just horrified. He tells the man point blank, no, your sin is way too big, unforgivable.
Well, harsh.
So the killer, despairing, actually kills the scholar too, makes it an even 100.
100, good grief. But then, like one last desperate try, he seeks out someone else, described as a man of insight, of wisdom.
Or what does he say?
This man offers a little bit of hope. He says, yes, forgiveness is possible, but you need to make a total break. Leave your sinful life, your city, and journey to this other city, a place of purity, of righteousness.
So it's not just saying sorry, it's action, a real commitment to change. Got it.
Exactly, a tangible turning around. And here's where the story gets really dramatic, suspenseful almost. As the man is traveling, making this tough journey towards the city of purity, death catches up to him. He collapses, dies before he gets there.
No, so close.
I know. And now this huge conflict erupts in the heavens. The angels of punishment arrive, pointing to the 100 murders. But the angels of mercy argue for him, saying, look, he was sincerely repentant. He was trying. He made the effort.
Wow, talk about high stakes. A celestial showdown, his fate just hanging there. What happens? Who decides?
Well, in this incredible moment showing divine mercy, God himself steps in.
God intervenes directly.
Directly. He tells the angels, measure the distance. Where did he die? Measure to the city he left and measure to the city he was trying to reach. Whichever one he was closer to determines his fate.
Okay, seems fair enough, I guess.
But then, and this is the really amazing part, the breathtaking act of grace, the hadith says, God miraculously caused the land itself to change. He shrunk the distance to the city of purity and stretched the distance from the city he'd left.
Change the geography.
Yes. So even though the man died just short of his goal, because his intention was pure, his effort was real, God made sure he was counted as belonging to the city he longed for. He was saved.
Wow. That's an incredible story. It really drives home that idea of God's overwhelming mercy, maybe even audacious mercy, and how much intention matters.
Totally.
And it stands in such stark, dramatic contrast to any idea that some sins are just too big, forever unforgivable.
Exactly. And this brings the speaker in the video to use this powerful analogy, like a theological courtroom drama, to really sharpen the difference between God and Islam and what they call Pauline Christianity.
What's the analogy?
The master versus the judge.
Okay, master versus judge. This sounds key. Lay it out for us. What's the difference?
So, the Islamic perspective, as they present it, sees God as the ultimate master, the sovereign owner of everything and everyone. That includes the person who does wrong and the person who is wronged.
Okay, master of all.
And as the absolute master, God has the inherent right, the prerogative, to forgive the offender however he wishes.
Yeah.
And if he chooses, he can personally compensate the victim himself. It's very direct, very personal, ultimately very dramatic divine authority.
So God isn't like tied up by legal rules in the same way.
Oh.
He has freedom to act with both justice and this incredible, maybe unexpected mercy.
Precisely. Now, contrast that with the image of God as a judge, which the video links to mainstream Christian theology, especially influenced by Paul.
Okay, God as judge.
A judge, in this analogy, is bound by the law. Every crime, every sin has to be accounted for. It must be punished according to the rules of justice. There's a legal system that has to be upheld.
Right, a judge can't just say, oh, never mind.
Exactly. There are constraints.
And this loops back to the role of Jesus' sacrifice again, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. In this God as judge framework, the argument is that sin can't just be waved away. justice demands something. A wrong needs to be righted.
So the sacrifice is?
So Jesus' sacrifice is presented as God's way, maybe. His ingenious way of meeting the demands of justice while also offering salvation. The punishment is still carried out, but it's transferred onto Jesus for those who believe.
Okay, so the really dramatic takeaway here, according to the video's analysis, is that in this view of Christian theology, God himself has never actually directly forgiven anyone.
That's the startling conclusion they draw, yes. The debt, the sin was always transferred. The punishment was always paid, just by someone else.
That is quite a thought. Really makes you pause.
It does. And it leads naturally to another key difference they point out. How sin itself is fundamentally understood.
Okay, how so?
In Islam, sin is primarily seen as causing God's displeasure, doing things against his will, straying from the path he set out, that earns his displeasure.
Okay, so it's about the relationship, about pleasing or displeasing God. How do you fix that? How do you lift the displeasure?
By seeking to please God again. And the video gives this incredibly moving example. Remember the story of the prostitute?
Vaguely, remind me.
This woman sees a dog dying of thirst, tongue hanging out, just suffering terribly. And moved by pity, she climbs down into a well, fills her leather sock with water, which must have been difficult, and gives the suffering dog a drink.
An act of kindness to an animal.
Yes. And the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is reported to have said that because of that single act of pure compassion, that mercy shown to one of God's creatures, God forgave all her past sins.
All of them?
Yeah.
Because she helped a thirsty dog. Wow, that's incredibly dramatic.
Isn't it? A seemingly small act of empathy outweighs maybe a lifetime of serious wrongdoings. It just perfectly highlights that direct, responsive relationship they describe. God's pleasure at her compassion just instantly, dramatically erased his displeasure over her past.
Yeah, that's powerful.
And that contrasts sharply, they argue, with understanding sin mainly as a debt in the Christian framework they're discussing.
Right, a debt that needs paying.
A debt demanding repayment, which then points back again to the necessity of Jesus' sacrifice to pay it.
This difference in just defining sin, it really changes everything about forgiveness, doesn't it?
Huge implications, absolutely. Then the video brings up something fascinating, almost paradoxical. It touches on the Lord's Prayer.
Okay, the line.
Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us.
Yeah, very familiar. What's the paradox they see?
Well, they suggest that the very fact humans are asked to forgive each other directly, without demanding payment or payback, implies we have that capacity for direct, unmediated forgiveness.
Okay, makes sense. We do it all the time, hopefully.
Right. But the dramatic paradox they point out is this. Humans are told to practice a type of forgiveness that, in their reading of Pauline Christian doctrine, God himself doesn't seem to practice directly. He requires the payment via Jesus.
Huh. That is really thought-provoking. Kind of unsettling, actually. If we're supposed to forgive freely, why would God operate under a different, more demanding system?
It pushes you to ask some pretty fundamental questions, doesn't it? About divine holiness, about justice. The video kind of implies that a holiness needing punishment, even if paid by proxy, is maybe a strange or limited kind of holiness compared to the human ability to just let it go, to forgive mercifully.
Okay, let's shift focus slightly to salvation itself. The video mentions a really powerful hadith, right? Where the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, says something like,
Yes, none of you will enter paradise by his deeds alone.
By deeds alone?
Not even me, the Prophet Muhammad, unless Allah grants me his mercy.
Not even the Prophet himself, just by deeds.
Exactly. That's a cornerstone teaching in Islam about salvation.
Yeah.
It highlights that, in the end, it's God's grace, his mercy, that gets anyone into paradise.
So your actions, your good deeds, they matter.
Oh, they definitely matter. The Quran talks a lot about rewards for belief and good works. But the point is, nobody should think their efforts alone are enough to guarantee it. You always need that divine favor, that unearned grace.
So it's not purely like transactional, do X good deeds, get Y reward.
No, it's more like your efforts are accepted and rewarded through God's mercy. Which, as the video presents it, contrasts with the Pauline idea of salvation through faith alone, where deeds might seem, well, less critical for salvation itself.
Right.
The speaker even uses this analogy, like, if someone told you only your words count, your actions don't matter. This would make sense, would it? Seems illogical.
It's definitely a long-standing point of contrast, isn't it? Faith versus works. And the video also mentioned hypocrites.
Yeah, the Quranic view on those who say they believe but their actions show they don't, really? It suggests their situation is considered even worse than someone who openly disbelieves. It adds another layer of complexity, doesn't it? What does faith really mean for salvation?
It really does. So digging even deeper now into what true faith means, how you actually get purified from sin. The video brings in the Ahmadiyya perspective, right? Quoting the founder.
Yes, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. He stresses that while lots of people might have a basic intellectual belief in God, real purification from sin, the kind that genuinely changes you, comes from a much deeper experiential understanding of God.
Understanding, not just belief. That's a really interesting distinction.
It is. He uses this vivid analogy, arsenic.
Arsenic.
Someone who doesn't know it's poison might just drink it by accident, but someone who truly understands it's deadly, they'll recoil from even a tiny bit. Similarly, he says, a true, almost gut-level understanding of God, his power, his wrath against evil, but also his incredible beauty and perfection, that understanding creates a natural aversion to sin. It's not just thinking, oh, I shouldn't do that. It's a deep, personal realization that changes you from the inside.
That sounds profound, almost mystical. How do you get that kind of understanding? Is it just study?
Well, the Ahmadiyya view suggests it's nurtured by being around prophets, around saintly people, those who already have that deep connection with God.
Through community and spiritual guides.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that association can actually lead to personal divine revelation, to this unshakable certainty that God exists. They believe God still communicates directly with people.
Wow. Direct communication.
Yeah, and it's this personal experiential knowledge of God that they believe sparks true love for him, and that love becomes the ultimate protection against sin. That's the bedrock of salvation in their view.
So bringing it all back around to that first question from Fuberus Rex about God's love.
Yeah.
The Islamic perspective, especially seen through this Ahmadiyya lens in the hadith we discussed, it definitely affirms God's love, right? His immense mercy. It echoes that prodigal son feeling.
Absolutely. The love and mercy are central.
But it operates within that framework of God as the ultimate master.
Yeah.
His forgiveness is a direct result of his own grace, his sovereign choice.
Precisely. It's a relationship defined by incredible love and mercy, absolutely, but also one where God's ultimate authority, his freedom to forgive as he wills, remains totally central and quite dramatic, really.
Okay, so as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, let's quickly recap those dramatic contrasts we've explored.
Good idea.
We saw really different pictures of God. The all-powerful master versus the judge bound by justice.
Right, two very different models.
We looked at different ways forgiveness works. That direct pardon versus forgiveness through a substitute, through vicarious atonement.
Huge difference there.
And we touched on different paths to salvation. The focus on deeds being accepted through God's mercy versus the primary role of faith.
Yeah, the deeds and mercy versus faith emphasis.
So considering these really deep fundamental differences, what does it truly mean for you, listening right now, to be in a relationship with the divine?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Does the idea of a God bound by strict justice feel more secure, more predictable?
Or does the idea of an all-powerful, all-merciful master whose ways might sometimes seem mysterious, beyond our full grasp, does that offer more hope? A more maybe awe-inspiring path?
The choice, it feels like, has some pretty heavy eternal weight behind it.
Definitely food for thought. Powerful questions that stick with you.
Absolutely, and we really encourage you, if this sparked your interest, check out that YouTube video that started it all for our listener. Maybe explore some theological writings from different viewpoints, grapple with these big ideas yourself.
Yeah, form your own understanding.
Okay, another layer peeled back in our ongoing search for understanding.
Until our next deep dive.